welcome to our channel. Here, we not only bring you closer to the fascinating and dramatic plots in movies full of unexpected plots like Beyond the Gates. Let's start today's journey with a secret that can change the fate of the characters that you thought you knew well. When the early winter sunlight poured through the half-closed curtains in the small wooden house on the edge of the city, no one in that house could have expected that a truth buried for nearly 20 years would suddenly burst out, causing a chain reaction that no one could handle. Leslie stood there, her hands clasped together, her face cold but deep in her eyes, there was an unprecedented torment. There was no other choice. She had kept this secret for too long, and now, seeing Eva growing more distant and lost in her own life, Leslie knew it was time to break the shell she had built for 2 decades. Bill, the man who had been Leslie's most passionate love during her wild youth, was now living a peaceful life, or so he thought. For years, Bill had believed that what had happened between him and Leslie was a fleeting love affair, a youthful mistake not worth looking back on. Little did he know that on their last night together, a new life had formed, and Leslie had chosen to keep that child, raising it alone in silence, far from everything that had belonged to her memories. Eva grew up in a world where she always thought her father was a man who had died early, a name on a birth certificate, an old photo with no face. She had never suspected anything, until she began to feel the faint cracks in the truth her mother had so fiercely defended. But she herself could not imagine that the man she still called Uncle Bill, an old, dear friend of her mother's, was the one who had helped shape her life. And she could not imagine that Leslie, her strong and sometimes cruel mother, had loved Bill so much that she had chosen to give up everything to hide the truth from him. When Leslie said it, not in an argument or a moment of loss of control, but in a voice that was strangely calm, as if she had rehearsed the words 100 times in her head, Bill was petrified. In a brief, knife-sharp moment, everything he had ever known about his life was turned upside down. He tried to smile. A crooked smile that lasted only a few seconds before his eyes fell on Leslie as if she had just dealt him a mortal blow. The blood in his temples throbbed, his chest heaved and his heart pounded. He turned away from Leslie's eyes, but his feet wouldn't move, drowning in a chaotic whirlwind of memories and reality. Bill suddenly realized that his life had entered a turning point from which there was no turning back. In that moment, a series of questions surged through his mind like raging waves. Why had Leslie hidden it from him? Did Eva know? If she did, how would she react? How could a father-daughter relationship be built after all these years apart, when everything was nothing but ashes? But most importantly, Bill began to doubt himself. He had loved Leslie once, that was undeniable. But this truth made him look back at all the other relationships in his life, especially the times he accidentally met Eva at family gatherings, holidays, and even strangely coincidental business trips. They all had one thing in common, a strange sense of familiarity that he had never been able to explain. From that moment on, Eva was not just a smart, sensitive, and somewhat mysterious girl that Bill once loved like a grandchild. She was a part of his flesh and blood, a part that was lost and now, no matter how hard he tried, he could never fully compensate for. Eva's early years, her first faltering steps, her lisping mom, her questioning eyes when asked about her father, all were moments that Bill had been deprived of, even though he was completely unaware of it. However, Leslie did not tell this truth just to hurt Bill. She has a reason, deep, painful and dangerous. Eva is facing a big choice in her life. She has accidentally discovered a conspiracy related to the mysterious death of her best friend, and the truth is threatening her own safety. Leslie believes that if Bill knew he was her biological father, he would commit himself to protecting Eva at all costs, even if it meant confronting the hidden forces that were deeply rooted in the tycoon world that none of the three of them had anticipated. From that moment on, everything that seemed peaceful gradually fell apart. Eva began to have doubts when she saw her mother and Bill having private conversations. Bill's gaze towards her was no longer the indifferent gaze of an old acquaintance, but a mixture of pain, self-reproach, and a strange instinctive love. She began to piece together the details. From the times Leslie forbade her from contacting people in the media, to the midnight calls between her mother and Bill that she accidentally overheard. And then Eva discovered the truth. Not from Leslie, not from Bill, but from an old letter Leslie once wrote but never sent, hidden in a book that Eva once considered meaningless. That letter not only revealed the truth about her father, but also opened the curtain of a hidden past full of calculations and tears. And also the secret of her late best friend, who may have been murdered to bury a mistake from Leslie's youth. From here, Eva's life will no longer be simply about finding her father's identity. She must face the ghosts of the past, powerful people willing to kill to silence, and the truth that her own blood is the result of a love affair that should never have existed. And in that storm, Bill must choose: continue to live the life of a man who thought he was safe, or become a true father, stepping into the darkness to protect the daughter he never knew he had. After the letter accidentally fell into Eva's hands, the atmosphere in the house, which was already tense, became more stifling than ever. Eva's every step now carried caution. As if the world she once believed in was falling apart. She no longer looked at Leslie with the eyes of an innocent daughter, but with the eyes of someone questioning not only about her identity, but also about everything that used to be called family. Leslie began to notice the change in the way Eva looked at her, in every silent and distant gesture. She knew the letter had been discovered. And she also knew that there was no way back. Every night, Leslie sat alone by the window, wondering if she had done the right thing by keeping the secret for 20 years. Was it selfish of her to keep silent, or was it just a way to protect her daughter from unnecessary chaos? Whatever the reason, the consequences were clear. Eva was no longer a child who needed to be protected, she had become a woman deeply hurt by the person she once trusted the most. Bill was different. Since the day he learned the truth, he had lived in a state of disorientation, like someone who had just woken up from a long coma. He began to rummage through the past, looking for signs he had missed, trying to connect the pieces he didn't know were missing. He didn't dare face Eva, but at the same time he was driven by a paternal instinct he didn't even know he had. There were nights when Bill stood for hours in front of Leslie's house, holding the small gift he had intended to give Eva since her college graduation, a gift he had thought of as a simple congratulatory gesture. Now, that gift weighed heavily on his chest, as it carried with it regret and a desire to make amends. But time did not allow anyone to linger too long in torment. A hidden force began to move in the darkness. A force that Leslie and her old friend Martin had faced since their youth. And then Eva begins to dig up her mother's past, the old relationships that Leslie tried to bury. She discovers a group of people who once operated under the guise of an international charity, but in reality were a money laundering and assassination network with close ties to Latin American politics and finance. Among the names investigated was a man codenamed Shadow Fox, who many sources secretly confirmed was Martin, Leslie's former lover and possibly the father of the child who died in a mysterious miscarriage. While Eva is drawn deeper into the mystery, Bill begins to act. He hires a private investigator, an old friend who used to work in the counter-terrorism force, to investigate Martin and the shady connections between past and present deaths. What they discover makes Bill unable to keep silent any longer. A photo taken at an international conference 2 years ago shows Martin still alive, standing behind a major investor in Brazil. His eyes cold and sharp like a predator. There is no doubt that Martin is back, and this time, the target may be Eva. This terrible truth makes Bill no longer hesitate. He proactively approaches Eva, reveals what he knows, and admits all his past mistakes. Not expecting forgiveness, not needing acceptance. Just hoping for a chance to protect her, even just once, as a real father. Eva initially reacts violently, but deep down, she also understands that without Bill's help, she will not be able to resist a force like Martin. The three of them, Eva, Bill and Leslie, are forced to put aside their personal grudges and work together to find a way to deal with the increasingly imminent threat. They follow Martin's trail to find his hideout, discovering a secret facility in the woods of Southern California where biochemical experiments were conducted by an NGO. Underneath the camouflage is a top-secret data forensics lab, where documents documenting the entire process of money laundering, political manipulation, and witness killing are stored, including Eva's name. marked in red as a target to be dealt with immediately. Tensions are pushed to a climax when Leslie receives a secret mailbox in her house. Inside is a tape recording of a child crying, accompanied by a message, "How long can you hide, Leslie? Memories don't die." It is Martin's voice, unmistakable. She knows that time is running out. The past has come back to life, and this time, it demands not only the truth, but also blood. When the last secrets are revealed, when the past that was thought to be dormant suddenly comes back to life like a ghost, the only thing left is the choice, between conscience and instinct, between running away and facing up. Will Eva, Bill and Leslie have the courage to overcome the storm that they themselves have unwittingly contributed to creating? Or will everything sink into darkness again, like so many times before? The next developments will surely surprise you even more. If you find this journey fascinating, if the twists and secrets make you unable to take your eyes off, don't forget to subscribe and follow our channel so you don't miss any shocking developments in the future.